Hello everyone, my name is Andy and I am very glad to be a part of the 我和山的故事 project. Now, you may know that the podcast I am doing revolves around my family's relationship with the mountains. Mountains are everywhere in Utah where I live. On weekends, my family likes to go to the mountains. We have hiked all over the big and little Cottonwood Canyons. We have also tried mountain biking and fishing in the mountain dells. In Inner Mongolia, where my family grew up, there are majestic mountains that resemble those in Utah. The word mountain in Chinese is shan, like this. Many Chinese characters are pictograms, stylized drawings of the objects they represent. The word mountain, shan, is a good example. See the mountain? Originally, the character looked like this. You can really see that in here. The character that represented it was invented sometimes when turtle shells were used to predict the future, and there was no history class since it was so far back. Then the word evolved to look something like this. This was found on ancient ritual bronze vessels, and after that, when written on bamboo slips and silk sheets, the primary form of writing in ancient China, it looked like this. It became more abstract and looked like this, like it does right now. During the pandemic, when we were all bored to tears and scared to death, mountains were our refuge. They were made calm and serene during those trying times. During the Stop Asian Hate movement, when violent racists threatened our lives, the mountains remained strong and welcoming. I am grateful for living close to the mountains, and this is where I belong.
My name is Xiumei Pu. I was born and grew up in a village in the southwest of Sichuan Basin, China, and now I live in Utah. I currently teach environmental humanities at Westminster College. I know there is a large Asian population living in Salt Lake Valley, but on my day hikes in the canyons, I often see very few or no Asian folks on the trails. I wonder about where they are. I've read enough articles of racial disparity in outdoor spaces, and I've made some observations of it. I wonder about what lived experiences, stories, and perspectives Asian folks can bring to the conversation around race and outdoor recreation, and more broadly, the question of identity, culture, and the natural environment. The idea of a storytelling project started at a dinner table. I was invited to a friend's home to celebrate the Chinese Spring Festival. At that gathering, I heard the stories shared by a Vietnamese family who came to Utah as refugees. And I thought more people should hear them and get to know that Asians are more than numbers in the U.S. Census. The 12 storytellers in this connection come from different ethnicities, age groups, and occupations. Among them, many hold leadership positions in the Asian and Pacific Islander communities. They have cultural roots in a range of geographical locations in Asia and the Pacific Islands. Each person brings their own unique experiences and stories to the table. To me, on the one hand, those stories are meant to be appreciated as individual stories, not as a representation of the entire ethnicity or race from which they come. On the other hand, I see how those stories are connected around the intertwined themes of home, identity, and our place in the natural world. 12 individuals are just a very small number in the population of the Asian and Pacific Islander communities living in Salt Lake Valley. The choice of 12 is for its symbolic meaning. The number 12 is to symbolize 12 months, the zodiac cycle of 12 years, to suggest that the interplay of cultural adaptation and preservation in response to environments goes on continuously through time and space.
The word for mountain in Tagalog is bundok. Mabuhay at Emilio Manuel Camus. I was born in Quezon City on the island of Luzon in the country of the Philippines, and I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. So, boondocks, when people refer to the boondocks, that's actually from American GIs and their experience in the Philippines during World War II. They're like, oh, they're in the boondocks, meaning they're hiding in the mountains. So that's why that's one of the Tagalog words that actually translated over to English and was adopted into the dictionary, because people kept referring to it as, oh, the boondocks, as in like the boonies or somewhere out there, but the boondocks refer specifically to the mountains. Growing up, mountains were always a place of refuge. And the first times that I've heard or encountered mountains in storytelling through my family was through my mom and my maternal grandparents. They would always share the stories of World War II and what Japanese occupation in the Philippines looked like. So for them, my maternal and my paternal grandparents' families, they would have to hide in the mountains to hide from the soldiers. And so growing up, that was kind of like the thing to like, hey, if you're alone, it's kind of dangerous. And I think culturally, that's just one thing for me. But I do find myself, if it's like water or the ocean, I'm more prone to visiting that by myself. But when it's the mountain, it's kind of, maybe I connote it with more like, okay, isolated and not the kind of isolation that I want. I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, beginning 2001, and I've been here for almost 20 years. That's when my family immigrated here. So definitely a Salt Lake City kid, even though I still definitely consider myself as having roots in the Philippines and the island of Luzon. Growing up, there weren't a lot of Tagalog and Bicolnon folks here. There were Filipinos, definitely, but people who I could learn from in terms of the overall experience of what it means growing up Filipino in Utah was very few. When I went to college, that's when my exploration of the mountains of nature kind of happened because of my involvement with the Asian American Student Association and the Pacific Islander Student Association at the University of Utah. That's what introduced me to the mountains and to nature and to environment here, because when I was going through public school, I didn't necessarily have a relationship with nature here. I saw it in kind of the background. I knew we were surrounded by mountains, but it wasn't something that I necessarily interacted with because my parents were both immigrants working full-time in different jobs and different careers with varying schedules. And so that's when that age for me, when being involved in the university, really opened that door, and the mountains became a place to be involved and where I could create relationships with people I cared about. I think one of my first memories with mountains is hiking the Bell's Canyon trailhead, and it was a shock. I never went hiking before, and that one took us 8 hours back and forth. And other people were like, well, how come it's only like a 3-hour hike? And I don't know. I don't know why it took us that long. Maybe because there was 25 of us from the student organization, but that's where we kind of developed our memories and our interest in hiking more and more. But we were often the only Asians or the only ethnic folks, people of color, that were hiking those trails at that time, and we were very hyper aware of that. That's why for us, we always went in groups. And I mean, people are nice enough, but I think growing up for us here in Salt Lake City, in West Valley, in Utah in general, we knew people and their kind of sort of subtle niceness, but also subtle racism. And so we would say hi to others. I think people are nice about the general greetings here, but in terms of like, okay, cool, like let's stay as our own group and not get too far ahead where we're having to interact with other folks and kind of collect ourselves. And I understand there are other people who are genuinely nice, but I think in terms of hiking, we did definitely feel out of place. Other people were like had walking sticks or what is it called, the backpacks with the water. And for us, I mean, some people had that from us because they were already into hiking, but for some of us, we were all wearing different university college shirts, like our student organization shirts, and some didn't bring water and some were just eating granola, and like we kind of didn't know what we were doing. We just knew we were together.
My name is Nikki Navio. I am from the Philippines, but I also grew up in Alaska, and I live in Utah now. My partner and I, we were really interested in spending more time outside, or like being connected to the mountains a bit more, and it reminded me a lot of home in Alaska. So just kind of the similar mountain landscape, and just a lot of, also the community is growing rapidly right now, and we were also driven by like the job opportunities that are here, and I'm an urban planner, so there's a lot of growth and urban development happening right now, and that's kind of how we ended up here. The thing that I think about most when I think about mountains is just the mass, like, just how big and vast everything is. Like going home to Alaska, whenever I drove back and forth from Fairbanks and Anchorage, which is where I grew up, you would see Denali and the Alaska Range, and it's massive. Like it evokes this like almost fear that you're, this fear of being out there. You just feel so small, but it's also a really comforting feeling. Growing up, like my parents would take me and I have one younger sister. We would go out fishing. A lot of the times we would go camping in within like the mountains, or not necessarily like into them, but like maybe at the base of them. It was very common to not necessarily, at least for most Filipino households that are first generation, to, like you don't really spend time in the mountains. You're kind of fishing or camping, but not necessarily backpacking or going into them. So I think that my relationship has evolved over time just because of being able to like spend more time in it. Like even though I didn't do like hiking or backpacking with my parents growing up, I was actually able to do those kinds of things with classmates and friends and through programs at my school. There were definitely things that in my household or like in my family, they didn't understand why I want, like why we come all the way here and we lived in like a hut where like, you sleep on a straw mat, and why would you want to go carry gear like 10 miles away and go do that? It's taken a long time to show the value in that for my parents, but I think that I've had to like reconcile those feelings of like this is how their relationship is to the mountains and to the land, and like this is kind of like that relationship has really informed how I've actually like spent my time in the mountains, and I think I attribute a lot of that to like those formative years. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of resources out there that are like thankfully like have become more popular in the last few years. There's a lot of gear collectives that are available, so if you are interested in donating your gear to like BIPOC groups, they have those to be like so that they can redistribute it to folks that are of like that need it. And are interested in getting into a sport. The third, and probably the most important, is like finding the community that so that you feel welcome. I did like a multi-day 400-mile ultra endurance bikepacking race, and I was the only person of color, well actually one of 3. I'm the only female person of color. And like it's kind of intimidating when you sometimes sometimes go into those spaces. So finding a mentor or other people that are really interested in connecting those folks so that you feel comfortable. So I always try to like extend, especially to people that are interested in sports, like extend the opportunity to share, like, you know, if you want to get outside and ride, like I will offer to ride with you, and make sure that you make yourself available, and also if not yourself, like direct people to community groups that are available, because I think that's very challenging and a huge barrier for Asian Americans and Pacific Islander communities to get out and participate.
The word for mountain in Vietnamese is Nui. Nui, when you say it, is elevated, right? Nui, it goes up. So my name is Kevin Nguyen. Vietnamese name is Kang. I am from the city of West Valley, Utah. I am currently a recent graduate of school, so I'm excited to finish school, yay. I am also currently working at the Utah Department of Health as the community health worker specialist, and also working at Salt Lake Community College as a health educator. Some of my volunteer roles include working as part of Salt Lake County Search and Rescue's team as a rescue diver and a squad leader. The relationship for me with the mountains started back when I was younger. We didn't have a lot of money, so we didn't have a lot of things. But one thing I did have is outside. And luckily I had a bike. And so we spent a lot of time biking outside. We spent a lot of time just playing in the dirt, playing in the trees, making makeshift things with rocks and water and dirt piles. And that's how we would have fun. And my love for the mountains started with playing in the hills of the parks that we had. And that really expanded towards the mountains. And being able to now have the opportunity to go there and not only hike and bike, but being able to participate in rescues and being able to help the people who recreate in our awesome mountains here in bringing them home, right, safely. Yeah, it's different because a lot of the trails that we do rescues on are also the trails where I go have fun on and where I go to, relax. And so whenever we're on a rescue call, it's a different shift. It's someone who's hurt, someone who's lost, someone who's scared. And I take on those feelings myself of, okay, we have to bring this person home. We have to go and find this person. And it's a wide range of emotions because not only do we get to help people who break their ankles or who hurt and break their backs or are just lost, but sometimes we have to also bring people home who have passed. And that's a whole other set of emotions where you're bringing home a loved one and just sometimes I absorb that, right? I'm glad that I get to do it, but at the same time, oftentimes I find difficulty in thinking about what this person must have felt or what are their final thoughts, before they passed. And that is something that I will never understand. But then there's the other side. We're on a search, starting at 6 p.m. and at 2 a.m. we finally find the person that's lost, and just the joy, and I imagine the comfort that they feel of they're not lost anymore. They're going to be okay. And that to me makes those long nights and often long days worth it. I learned to respect nature a lot more. I learned to respect water. I learned to respect our mountains. I learned to respect our trails, and also what I'm capable of, as a person in doing. And I think I also learned to appreciate it a lot, right? Where it's there's this such strong force of nature, but yet that's the place I go to feel calm and to feel just connected with not only where I'm at now, but also with my childhood growing up being outside. And I guess it just enhances my experience now, being outside and being in these spaces. I've had many moments, and some of the best moments have been just being outside. You know, whether that's going down south and finding a really cool BLM camping spot and just really geeking out about, oh my gosh, there's this rock shelf here, and you know, that is going to be our little table, and then you know, there's this cool tree, and that's where we're going to set up our tent, and just really having that, you know, like imaginative state again, just like when I was a kid, or even just exploring new trails throughout our awesome mountains that we have here. Right, that's always an awesome experience for me. It's just going out there and you're not knowing exactly where this leads to, but it's just you and I guess me and my bike going along, and wherever it takes me is wherever it takes me. And there's just something magical about that. I really like to, and I don't know who exactly is going to be viewing or hearing this, but really just encouraging, especially those from like the Asian community, to really come out and feel what it feels like to be outdoors and to be in our mountains, to be, you know, with nature, and encourage people to try to connect together and go out and explore. You know, I certainly have gotten a lot out of it, and I want to encourage, you know, my Asian community to be able to come out and feel and see the same things that I'm seeing. Just number one is doing it together. At least for me, it's always been scary trying to do something by yourself, but there's something about being together and being with community, right, where we're all a little bit scared and we all don't know what to do, but we're gonna go out and we're gonna try to do it together.
So in my mother tongue Pashto, it's called Ghar. Ghar means mountain, Khuruna means mountains, and then in Farsi, Ko means, you know, mountain, and then Koha, or mountains. You know, when I go to the mountain, you know, the first thing that comes to mind is how I'm living my life, right? I'm living off of the energy of hope for the next 10 seconds, for the next 10 months, you know, 10 minutes, 10 years, you know. And of course, I think back home, you know, living life is very uncertain. You don't know if you're going to live the next day or not. And every time that I would go to the mountain, I would actually imagine and also, you know, see my future, to see where I'm going to end up in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, and how I'm going to be able to change the world. As much as, you know, this sounds cliche. Like when I go to the mountains in Utah, of course I reflect on, you know, like the city, how peaceful it already is, right? But back home, that is something that you don't actually think about, right? Back home, you think about yourself more, your survival, your connectedness, you know, like to the mountains more. But I think here it's like, because there's no war, I think it just gives you more space to connect with the nature more, rather than thinking about, you know, sometimes a war zone, right? You cannot escape that even if you go to the mountains. But I think like finding peace in the mountains back home is even more challenging, because you have to escape through thinking through all these challenges and, you know, concerns and your future, and also reflections on identities and all of that. And then to finally eventually get some peace, you're like, you know, I found some peace, I did all my reflections, now it's time to connect with the nature. So it's a process, it's a longer process to connect with peace and to find the peace to yourself by going into the mountains there. But here in Salt Lake, it's much easier to get to the peaceful stage of your adventure at the mountain. But back home, every time you go to a mountain, people tell you history, right? That, hey, Alexander the Great came in here, you know, like invaded this part. Genghis Khan came in, right? All these crazy things. This is how we, you know, sought refuge when the Russians invaded us. So it's all about war and history and like invasion, all of that. And every time that you step in, you feel like a soldier. In terms of history, right? At the Afghan mountains, you know, every time that you climb up to a mountain, you know, people in that neighborhood even, you know, tells you that, hey, like, remember this rock? This was formed like 15,000 years ago, or like, because Afghanistan is extremely old. It's like 3000 BC or something. Genetics go back to like 50,000 BC. Extremely old. There are places that have been built like thousands of years ago. But yeah, so every time that you go to a mountain, you're reminded of the history, that who actually stepped like on these rocks, right? Stepped their feet on these rocks. So you can see like the mountains. You can like sit down there, and sometimes you just reflect, with yourself and say that, like, imagine who actually sat on these things, sat on these rocks 10,000 years ago. What does the world look like? Was it all desert? Was it all mountains? Where were the camels? Where were the donkeys and horses? But yes, I think like it's definitely a very fascinating, historical place to explore. But of course, it's extremely unsafe as well. With the everyday, bombing going on, explosions. At Kabul University, they killed many. There's threatening to, kill people. So I think it's definitely a very unsafe place, but the history is rich, for sure. I think when I came to, to do a little bit of a talk at United Nations, and also to, after, like a while, attend the Seeds of Peace International program in Maine, that was a big cultural, shift and difference. I went to New York and I see a lot of mountains. I see like skyscrapers. I thought that, mountains would be this skyscraper, but then I saw like Empire State. I was like, wow, this is crazy. So I definitely saw, like a big cultural, shock and exchange there. And then I went back home, of course. And then I came to Utah. But in Utah now I feel home away from home. Every time that, it's in the night around like 5 or 6 p.m. I, roll out the window and then I look at the mountains, drink a cup of, tea. And I just feel really home. I don't feel as much homesick at all sometimes.
In Nepali, for mountains, we use the terms Pahar or Himal, depending on whether the mountain structure has snow on it or not. My name is Prasanthi Limbu and I'm from Nepal. I was born and raised in a town called Dharan, which lies in the southern plains of eastern Nepal. So my hometown is located on the foothills of a mountain. I've loved to be around nature ever since I've known myself, but like when you have to go to the mountains, you have to get there, right? You can't just walk and go there. So we don't really have like accessible public vehicles, or people don't really have their own like personal cars. And I mean, I don't think I was able, my parents would leave me there and just be like, oh, go, you can go on your own, like you can just go on walk on that trail. And yeah, I think that was not something that is safe for people, for children, or maybe anyone. That is why it's difficult. I would say mountains are difficult. Well, as a child, I had always dreamt of going abroad for studying, like to different nations. And yeah, while I was trying to apply for colleges, I came across a friend and he told me, hey, have you seen this Westminster College? I'm like, no, and it's in Utah. I'm like, what is Utah? Like, yeah, that is when I realized Utah actually was there. As I came here, I had to like see the challenges, and I had to fit into this new world. So yeah, it's a challenge, but I wouldn't say it's so difficult because I get to talk to my parents whenever I want to. I saw the mountains. I constantly felt I was at home because I came here in the fall of 2018 when it was still summer, and I could see green on those mountains, and I felt it was really similar to the mountains of my hometown. So I could feel a connection. I felt like geographically, I felt I was home. I have one of the same problems that I had back home, that is I don't have a car. But whenever I have the chance, I do go out there in the mountains. And recently, we also did our project for a ecology class in the Wasatch Mountains. So yeah, I just like that. Even though we're not able to take the trek and then just go up and down the mountain, but I feel like I was up there, so it really made me feel good. We did not really trek. Our parents they did not take us as kids to trek in the mountains, but rather we used to go up on this hill station, and we used to take bus, and we had like picnic spots, and yeah, that was our recreation up in the mountains. If you see the flags of the different the entire nations of that we have on planet Earth, you can see that mostly they are square or rectangular shaped, but the flag of my country, it's made of 2 triangles. And well, even though we have 2 triangles, there's not really a origin as to how we have that flag shape in the first place. Nobody knows. So well, I was just thinking how I should connect my flag with my home culture. So we have we would say mountains have play a huge role in our lives. So maybe because it's been always there. So yeah, I wanted to have this connection. So I went there in Xiumei Park and I went to get the mountain range in the frame of my picture, and I was trying whatnot to hold that triangle to make it seem visible, but well, it's unstable. So I was trying my very best to try to show the connection that I feel with the shape of the flag and that of the mountain. I have to say that look, the flag has mountain peaks, so does mountains, so there should be a connection, right? So I was trying my very best to show that connection, and personally that is what I feel. Maybe those mountains and those flags, they might be connected. I feel like I really want to get there. I really want to get back to my hometown, but as of now I'm trying to study and I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing, but I don't know when that would be. Like I said, maybe somewhere in the future, but I'm not really sure because I'm trying to study. I'm trying to set an identity for myself. I want to be independent, right? So, and I feel like the US has more opportunities for me, so that is why I will be sticking around, but I cannot really say the exact time or year I would be going back to my country.
My name is Kripa Thapa, and I am from Nepal. Currently, I'm pursuing my master's in geography at the University of Utah. So this just takes me back to when I was 6 or 7 years old, and I used to accompany my brother when he used to fly kites. So when he was on the rooftop, I just used to tiptoe on my feet and just look at the range of Himalayas that could be seen from my rooftop. And I used to get really mesmerized by that. And flash forward 10 years later, I go to the same spot and I try to look at the mountain range, and it seemed really blurry at that time. And that was because Kathmandu, where I'm from, Nepal, the capital city, Kathmandu was facing a lot of pollution in the name of widespread urbanization. And it was right there and then I knew that, okay, I want to work for the environment. I want to see what this path is going to take me. After that, while I was pursuing my undergraduate research, I was studying glacier meltwater chemistry, and that allowed me to explore this new study site in Manang, which was in a valley that was surrounded by big giant mountains. And when I just looked at them, I used to feel like they're more than just these big gigantic structures, and I want to speak on their behalf. It kind of pushed me to study mountains and glaciers in particular, and now I'm at this point where I actually want to work towards building resilient mountain communities through my science. I just want my science or my research to justify any work that can be done at policy level, just including these mountain communities. We look at mountains, especially in Nepal, a lot of natural resources in Nepal is so untouched and pristine because we have safety issues there. We don't have good transportation all the way up to the mountains as compared to what I see in Salt Lake. And I think because it's always been projected as this pristine, untouched, virgin land, when I could see that what the pollution was doing to my view and how climate change on a larger scale was affecting the mountains and all the human settlements that reside there, I think it was really sad and disappointing. We need to look at mountains as not just as these gigantic landscapes that we need to conquer or something like that. I think as of now, I'm really interested in working on behalf of the mountain communities, just looking for a sustainable future for them, just building like a self-sufficient or like a resilient community that resides there, because a lot of their economic activities is hindered by just the adverse climatic conditions that they are living in, and there's limitation when it comes to harvesting good produce because of lack of arable lands. And Nepal is a developing country, right? So we don't have good infrastructure up there in the mountains, which is also understandable because of the rugged topography. There are a lot of like these shortcomings that the mountain communities feel and experience, and like the impacts of climate change is going to have like such adverse effects on the mountain communities living there. They might have to migrate to another place, and nobody wants that. If I was asked to move to a different location because of these other people who are being careless and not taking climate change seriously, then I would be really bummed about it, right? So I think we just need to signify their importance, like how they need to be saved firsthand. I think just building resilient mountain communities is where I see my future in.
The word mountain in Tongan is mo'unga. My name is Fahina. My full name is Otolose Fahina Tavakepasi. I was born in the island of Tonga. I pretty much grew up in the Bay Area. We moved there when I was 8. We moved here into Salt Lake City in 1990 and have been here since. The island of Tonga has no mountains, but there is a saying that's Tonga mo'unga kiheloto, which basically means Tonga, the mountains are in our hearts. Mountains are our hearts. So I think for us, or for me, I think that's the first connections that I really have with mountain, is the fact that as a Tongan, we carry whatever the mountain is, the majesty of it, the greatness of it, and for us to think that that our hearts are the mountains, and it helps us to accomplish whatever our goals is. You know, it's kind of like one of those big encouragers for us, you know, Tonga mo'unga kiheloto. It's like, you know, yeah, we're gonna do it. So that's the mountain in our hearts, you know, to be able to accomplish whatever we want to do. You know, for me, it's all of what's inside. I have to be determined to accomplish goals, accomplish whatever it is that I need to do. So Tonga mo'unga kiheloto. So for me, look at myself as a Tongan woman, and you know, my mountain or my all that is in my heart. That's what's going to make me accomplish the goals, is what's inside me. I think for me, it's kind of like a reminder that we need to, for me, it's a reminder that we are not all that. Sometimes we as humans think we're all that, and we think, you know, whatever, and we're destroying nature and doing all kinds of stuff just in our behalf. We tend sometimes to be very selfish and not really acknowledge the greatness of things. I mean, you know, like I was saying earlier, like even just a leaf here, you know, we look at this and we look at the leaf and just think, oh, well, it's just a leaf. But really, I mean, if you think of what a leaf has to offer and what it does, we can't do anything like that. So for me, a mountain is very similar to that. A mountain, it reminds me of the majesty of nature and the beauty of nature and all that has to offer, and how we have stuff to offer too, but we have to kind of like remember that we are not all that. For me, if I were to describe, it'd be very difficult, because for me, mountains are very diverse. For me, mountains, like I was saying earlier, mountains here in Utah could be a protective kind of a thing for us too, because it surrounds us. In one sense, it could be protective. In another sense, it could also hold in trouble. You know, coming in here, looking around, there's all this mountain, and then it's like you felt trapped, but at the same time, you see the majesty of it all. It's beautiful. Back in the Bay Area, where I stayed, you have to kind of go across the bay to see mountains and things like that, or go down. So for me, it was very, there's ocean. I'm more of like an ocean person. I love ocean, the beaches and things like that. So that was really nice. But coming here, I think it was quite a change to have this mountain. I still don't see myself as a mountain person though, even though I'm here. I think Utah later on, I think, and now that I'm kind of getting older, or I am older, I should say not getting older, I am older, it almost feels like maybe this is a good place to where, when not retiring, I don't know about the retiring word, but it's a place to where you can kind of slow down and it would still be okay.
The word mountain in Samoan is maunga. My name is Catherine, Moana Elizabeth, Sali Itu Walemali Atoa Tomalatai Figel, and I was born and raised in Samoa and moved to Utah in 2012. In American Samoa, they have one mountain. It's just one huge mountain in American Samoa. We actually lived up there for a while. There were actually a lot of people that lived up there. I actually liked it better than living with everyone else, living in the villages, because it was a lot more peaceful, I guess. And the community up there was great. Everyone got along really well. We moved quite a lot when we were in American Samoa. At one point, we were homeless in Samoa, and it was kind of like a homeless shelter that we lived at up there. But we were the only ones who lived, us and another family, but we got along very well. It was hard, but we got along very well. We managed to make it out. When I was little, I couldn't tell that we were homeless. We were living a really happy life. We were comfortable. I think my mom raised us very well, so we couldn't really tell what was going on. We just enjoyed every moment of it, I guess. We played a lot, actually. There are farms close by. We'd run around and we'd climb on trees and everything and stuff. Because that was the only thing we had, It was just the land. We had to make use of it because we were kids. We didn't really have toys or anything, We had each other, which I think it was great because we were never bored. I know this sounds kind of cringy, but you felt free, Because there were no fences, no boundaries or anything. It's just the land to yourself, I guess. That's kind of what it felt like to me when I was little. When I was running around, I felt like everything was mine. I felt like all the trees were mine. And yeah, it was just, I don't know how else to explain it. I think we had to use a lot of our imagination when we were little, especially because we didn't have a lot of things. But it was fun because we got to create a lot of stuff using the land. Even the trees and the sticks, we built stuff with the sticks or whatever. We made kind of dolls, I guess. I think it was cool how we were able to use all the resources on the land instead of actually getting things. We knew how to use the resources on the land to our advantage. When people think of a homeless shelter, it's not really there aren't really any positive connotations to it, I guess. But living there with my family, it was actually a great experience, Even though it wasn't our place, but we made it, we did all we could to make it our place. We had our own land in Samoa, and we did whatever we wanted, but here it's we're a little, I don't know, we're a lot more busy, I guess. And there's not really any time to do anything. But I think when we do, we usually we like to do family things together. We try to go on hikes together and interact with everyone else, but we don't really have the time. I look at the mountains every day. Well, that's the only place those are the only things you can see, but I love it, especially when the sun goes down, the sunset. It's so nice when you see the silhouette of the mountains. It's just so beautiful. I remember moving here for the first time because I was scared. I thought it was just really scary. I was there's so many mountains. It felt kind of like small, like everything. It's like, I don't know. I was just so nervous. I was happy, but I was excited, but I had just so much adrenaline like rushing through my body. I was just like nervous and scared at the same time because I didn't know what we were doing. I didn't know why we moved here. And it was just, I was kind of confused, but excited to see that we were doing something new, I guess. I think one thing I want to say is just to like get more involved with your community and like your culture, because I feel like being rooted in your culture is such an important thing. So I feel like we should have like more of those activities where we come together as a community and we experience our cultures and stuff, and we show people what our culture is and why it's so important to us, because I feel like that's such an important part of us and our connection to just like the earth as a whole and just everyone, I guess. I hope that makes sense.
My name is Jake Fitzsimano Jr. I live in West Valley City, Utah. I was born in New Zealand and grew up in Hawaii as well as Utah. So my parents came to Utah in the 1990s. And so I've been here in West Valley for about 15 years, but I graduated from high school here. I went to Westminster College with my undergrad and my master's degree. So Utah's home as much as the Pacific and southern China is also ancestrally home. But this is where I'm settled and not planning to leave anytime soon. I coach the Zhenghing Lion Dance Club, which is derived from actually the oldest lion dance club in the state of Utah, with over 40 years now of tradition. And it's just a neat experience to be able to teach a new generation, including my own kids, my own nephews, nieces, an art that has been part of our culture since the Tang Dynasty, about 1,300 years. So it's a place of privilege for me to be able to teach that. Mountains actually feature very prominently in the origin of lion dancing. And so the two main styles or schools of lion dancing today are actually named after the mountain regions where they came from. So the style that we do in our school here is called Fa San, which means the Buddha mountain. And about an hour's drive south of that, on the other side of that valley in the Pearl River area of southern China, is Hokshan, which is the crane mountain, like the bird, the crane. And so these two styles kind of evolved along with different kung fu styles, martial arts that are very specific to these two regions. And even today, you can tell the distinction in the rhythm of the drumming, in the way that the lions actually look are very distinct, slightly distinct, and the styles of the dancing. And so they're actually derived from these mountainous regions where they're developed, and we retain the names of those mountains when we represent the art today. My mother's family is now 6 generations in Hawaii, originally from southern China. And so this is something that I grew up with, the vibrant sounds and smells and the firecracker smoke of Chinese New Year celebrations. Lion dancing was always a part of that. And later in life, as I became more interested in family history and kind of my cultural identity, and learned that, you know, my grandfather's family was a famous martial arts family and a lineage that has practiced lion dancing for hundreds of years. And I wanted to be a part of that, and felt that it was a birthright or an inheritance from my ancestors that I would be remiss in taking advantage of. And so that's how I got involved in lion dancing, and not just preserving that tradition, but making it relevant in urban 2021 United States. And so that's how I got into it, and that's why I continue doing it. I do feel like there is a sense of community that lion dancing or any Chinese folk art or traditional art is able to really pull together. And I think some of that is because it is strange to see this in outside of its original setting. And so kids, especially a new generation of Chinese Americans, get a chance to ask questions about what is that, or why does it look like that, or why does it do that, and gives a chance for uncles and aunties and grandparents to then answer those questions. Hopefully they're answering those questions and creating dialogue, intergenerational interactions that might not happen if this guy didn't show up at your grandma's 80th birthday party. You know, to me, mountains are so immense and large that when you're on top of one, you've hiked up this mountain for hours, but you get to the top of a mountain and the view is spectacular. It gives you a sense of how small you are in the world or in the universe, but also what an intricate part of the world that you are. And so a memory that I have is a mountain in Falefa, which is my dad's village where he was born in Samoa. And being able to go to the top of that mountain where there's a beautiful waterfall that's on all the tourist postcards and that kind of thing, and being able to know that this is where we come from. And in that Samoan worldview, it's not just a geographic origin of this is where we come from, but this is who we are. These are the elements that constitute our bodies, that this is part of our genealogy. And I think that's a memory that I hope to pass on to my kids when I get to take them there as well. I think references to faith and worship are almost universal when it comes to mountains. If you look at the 5 sacred mountains in China, including Songshan, where the Shaolin Temple is today, the home of Zen Buddhism, for example. And in Samoa, we have a mountain in Whangaloa called Uafato, where there are actually prayer mounds, or different places where people would ascend step by step in approaching the heavens, literally and figuratively, where people would fast, where people would offer sacrifices to the gods, or people would commune with something that was higher than them and bigger than them. I think that's something that I still consider in my own relationship with mountains today.
My name is Zimen Sao. In Chinese, it's Sao Zemin. I was born in a rural village in Zhongshan province in China. Growing up in China and the mountains in Zhongshan province is very different than the mountains here in Salt Lake City, Utah. It's very smaller. It's smaller in size. They're more hilltops than they are mountains here. And what comes to mind when I remember the hilltops in Zhongshan in China is association with the spring sweeping of the tombs festival. And the sweeping of the tombs festival is when you go to the tombs of your ancestors, and usually back at the days they don't do it anymore. They buried the dead in the mountains, in the hilltops. And so every year around May, and this is based on the lunar calendar, so I can't tell you exactly what day is because it changes a lot. The whole family would go up to the tombs. It's called sweeping the tomb, meaning that you're just paying respect for the dead, and you clean the tombs. It's always been an annual event. I remember my aunts and my uncles from Hong Kong and other places coming back will have a big roast pig, like the entire pig. They would carry the pig up the mountains with food and vegetables, and we sit around and we offer the food to the ancestors, and there's incense involved, and it's just like, I don't know how to explain it. It's more kind of like a picnic in a way. So when I think about mountains and my childhood growing up, that is what I remembered. We don't go to the mountains for camping or hiking. It's not the way. The only time I go there is to the sweeping of the tombs. My family's journey to America actually started in the 1890s, 1900s. My great-grandfather was a laborer that went from Canton to Hawaii and worked in the plantations, the sugarcane plantations in Zhongshan province. At that time, there was a famine, so people were looking for ways to support their family. And at the same time, there was this huge sugarcane plantations that the Europeans were settling in Hawaii. There was a huge movement of people from Zhongshan to not just the sugarcane plantations in Hawaii, but also to the California coast. So I'm really proud to be a part of this project. So that's how my family's journey to America, to connecting to some of the dots and the policies that a country has made, and the prevention of those families from unification. There's the Chinese Exclusion Act at that time where that's not allowed individuals to sponsor their families. It's supposed to be you come to work in the United States, you go back home. And that was also always the sentiment for a lot of the workers that was working in the plantations at the time. It's like, I make money, I go back home, but that actually many of them did not return, although some did. And so with all those anti-immigrant policies that are in place targeting the Chinese Americans, as well as other Asian communities, my great-grandfather was not able to bring the family over to Hawaii till my dad's time. And how my dad ended up in American Samoa is because he was sponsored by my great-aunt to work in the restaurants in Hawaii. And I don't know what happened. He went island hopping after a little bit and then ended up in American Samoa. And in American Samoa, the mountain there are different than the mountain here as well. There's beautiful waterfalls, and my friends and I do go up to the mountains. To the beach more than the mountains. But occasionally we do go up to the mountains and go to the waterfalls and we play around there. And so the contrast between China, where we don't go to the mountains, then the mountains seems, when I was growing up in American Samoa, is a playground for us. And journeying from American Samoa to Utah, in the mountains here, is very different as well. Right? And we have the seasons. In the Samoa, we don't have the seasons. It's always 78 degrees all year long. So either you like that or you don't. But the mountains here offers a greater experience than in American Samoa. Although I don't enjoy winter sports, it's too cold for me. I prefer the beach at my 78 degrees. But I do enjoy the mountains as a place where I could just get away from the city and being able to enjoy nature. I do love nature, and I do go hiking quite a bit up in the mountains here. And being the proximity to nature in a way that we have in Utah is I think is a luxury and things that we take for granted. For me, I think the mountains where I grew up, it was more of a symbol of associated with the sweeping of the tombs. To American Samoa was just kind of a playground, and here it represents kind of freedom to be with the environment.
My mother language is Toisanese, and I learned Cantonese. In the USA, I learned Mandarin. In my hometown language, mountain is sun. My name is Margaret Yi. I born in Hong Kong, and I raised in China. And I went to Bahamas then before I come to Salt Lake City. And now I live in Salt Lake City, Utah for 59 years. Since I came here, then I never moved to no other state. I just love Utah. Utah is my home. To me, the mountain meaning is magnificent, and it is beauty, and it's longevity, because the magnificent is the great view you can. It is for the view is so beautiful. For beauty, the beauty is is the peace, joy, and family get together for hiking together is what it is. For longevity, the mountain as the transient time. So everybody know about the mountain is the history of the mountain. They know about history. Is passing down through the generations. When I was a young girl, my dad and my mom always tell me that great-grandfather had the vision, have the desire. They go to Gold Mountain because at that time, and we had Taipei Rebellion, and it's a famine in China. People looking for an exit at that time. But also in the USA, they try to build a railroad. Just finish the gold rush. The gold rush finished. Then I heard that there's one gold mine, and they get $1 billion of gold, and they didn't do it anymore. So the Chinese go to pick another $1 billion of gold. So the gold mine, it's a gold rush at that time. Everybody don't care to work at the railroad at all. There's shortage of railroad workers. So they try to recruit the people. They can find people to work. So they decided to ask the Chinese to work, and they test few Chinese, they working so good. So they want to go back, lots of recruiters, go back to China to recruit. They went to my village to recruit my grandfather and Phil, their cousin. That's why they came over here to work over here. My mom always tell me when grandfather came over here to the Gold Mountain to work here, there's opportunity, and there was land of opportunity with the Gold Mountain in here. They changed the families for a better life, and they help the future generation have a better quality of life. So, and they came over here to work, and the mountain in here is lots of mountain in here, you know. So, and from Bahama, I came over here. There's no mountain. When I came here, I see so many mountains, and here, the mountains surrounded us, me and the family in Utah. It brought lots of opportunity for us to be in Utah, and lots of memory and lots of history for my great-grandfather. Then they worked in the railroad, and I never realized that I will came to Utah and at the Gold Mountain. It's a great opportunity and a great to remember our ancestors, their sacrifice, their hard work to build the transcontinental railroad. Gold Mountain is in China because of the gold rush over there, that over here, then people everywhere, they pick up the gold. They call it Gold Mountain. In my little mind, young mind at that time, I was so fascinating from the story my dad and my mom tell me. I said, when I grow up, I will go to the grandfather's Gold Mountain. I never realized I really come to Utah. Then I came to the Gold Mountain. My dream come true. At that time, I was thinking, actually, the mountain with gold. That's why it was so fascinating. I had to go there to see the Gold Mountain. It referred to United States. Is the land of opportunity. Is the gold everywhere. Is the mountain, a mountain of gold. When I first came to the United States, I have no idea Utah is the promontory point here. The west and the east, they get married. From the west is the Central Pacific. From the east is the Union Pacific. May 10, 1869, they put the last golden spike in promontory. I have no idea. They come in a circle, I didn't realize I will live in Utah. Then I know is right here is my dream come true. Yeah, and right in the backyard, people to travel for far away to come over here to the Golden Spike event. I don't have to. I can go there anytime. Started in 1990. Because the Box Elder County, they held an event every year. So we go there to pay respect to our ancestors every year. I love the mountain here. I went hiking and we see wildflower. We hiking with the children and the grandkids at a special occasion. We talk about great-grandfather's great contribution to the mountain. Because of the mountain, then we hold so many memory and story and think about the great contribution. Because of the beautiful mountains surrounding us, we have the opportunity to do so many wonderful things for this beautiful state of Utah and for our future generation. When they do the reenactment at the mountain of the promontory summit, we are walking on the railroad track. I can feel the hard work that they did. The commitment, the sacrifice they did, because it is they being discriminating, and they have to pay for the food, they have to pay for the room and board, and everything. They have to, that's a hard work. So we learn from them. We had to do the hard work and the importance of the family. So, we can feel the hard work. That's why I have to value the great contribution the sacrifice to make us where we are today. We would like a lot more people to know about it. We like to put it in the curriculum. It's like a young kid like you, nobody know about it. You know, we want the people to know the sacrifice, the contribution, the Chinese railroad worker, the contribution to the USA. Like we said, the Chinese helped build the railroad. The railroad helped build America.
Stories are not just words springing from our mouths. They are the expressions of our experiences and memories. They are the very evidence of our existence. The project is near the end, but a connective space has been created both on the screen and in the real world. I marvel at the richness, vibrancy, and the beauty of this space the storytellers have co-created. When stories are not told, they cannot be returned to the cultural life cycle to nourish our minds and hearts. Once they are told, they become sediments on a riverbed of consciousness. They become part of who we are on a more conscious level, part of our cultural genealogies. Unless we insist on carving out space and creating story archives, we run the risk of being flattened to a blurry mass. I hear the diverse and special meanings that mountains hold for each storyteller, and the diverse ways of how they make their home in this mountain environment, while staying connected with their cultural roots. Those stories bear a lot of hope in times of social divide and environmental crisis.
Cheers!
Geologically, mountains are born out of the movement of the tectonic plates in the Earth's crust. In many cultures, including many Asian and Pacific Island cultures, these ancients stand as contradictory symbols of violence, destruction, creativity, majesty, beauty, wisdom. In my mind, they provide great metaphors to help those of us who live under the influences of great adversity to find inspiration, hope, and strength to continue to live and not give up.